The pain of seeing too much. Have you ever sat in a crowded room and still felt like a ghost? Everyone around you was laughing, chatting, interacting, but you felt like an outsider watching a play, quietly observing, completely disconnected. No one seemed to notice the growing distance inside you, but you could feel it louder than anything else. You tried to fit in, tried to laugh at the right moments, tried to care about the things people around you cared about. But deep down, you knew you were pretending. There was a part of you that couldn't fake it, couldn't blend into the shallow, couldn't treat the profound as optional. You sensed things others didn't. A flicker in someone's eye, a brief hesitation in their tone, an unspoken tension in the air. Something inside you works like a hidden antenna, always picking up the world's undercurrents. And that's exhausting, because you can't switch it off, and you can't explain it to anyone. Carl Jung called this dangerous perception. Not because you're a threat, but because your ability to see through people makes them feel exposed. Most aren't ready to be seen that deeply. So you become the mirror they want to avoid. That's where the loneliness begins. Not because you lack social skill, but because you feel too much. You see too deeply, and you simply can't pretend you don't. Maybe you've told yourself you're too sensitive, too different, too much to ever live a normal life. But if you can't return to being ordinary, maybe it's because you never were. Maybe it's because you've woken up. And that's why you've never quite fit in. Because for a long time now, you've been seeing things most people aren't ready to see. Sign 1. You sense what others try to hide. You don't just hear the words people say, you hear what's underneath. A breath that catches for a second too long. Eyes that glance away just before a smile. Silence that stretches half a second longer than it should. Someone tells you about their lavish vacation, but you can feel the weariness in their voice. They boast about work, but you sense the emptiness quietly eating away at them. You don't try to see these things. You just can't unsee them. It's not a skill you trained. It's simply the way your presence works. As if your soul was built to pick up the very signals others try to bury. And that doesn't make you feel powerful. It makes you feel alone. Because when you start seeing too clearly, you become a mirror. And not everyone wants to look into a mirror, especially when it reflects parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. The fear, the lies, the darkness they carefully hid beneath social smiles and curated confidence. Some people say you're too intense. Others say you overanalyze. Some just get visibly uncomfortable in your presence, even if you haven't said a word. It's not what you do, it's what you reflect. And what you reflect is something many aren't ready to confront. Carl Jung once wrote, "Those who become mirrors are hated by those who have never dared look into their own reflection." You're not imagining the distance. You're just showing people a version of themselves they weren't ready to meet. And eventually you learn to soften your gaze, blur your presence, hold back what you see. Not because you want to, but because you start to fear the reaction. You're not afraid of what you see in them. You're afraid of what they'll do once they realize you've seen it too. But in protecting them from your truth, you begin to dim your own. And that's when the real cost shows up. Not in what you can't see, but in what you stop seeing in yourself. So the real question isn't whether you see others too clearly. It's this: have you ever hidden yourself just to protect the ones who couldn't handle the truth you carry? Sign 2, you can't tolerate the superficial. You've probably sat through a conversation and wondered why it made you feel so hollow. People talk about prices, the weather, movies, or the latest news. But inside you, something deeper is stirring. Questions about meaning, about fear, about loneliness that no one dares to name. You nod, you smile, you reply politely. But with every passing sentence, you feel yourself drifting further away from who you really are, surrounded by people, yet sinking slowly into a silence only you can hear. It's not that you're difficult, and you're not trying to be different. You just can't pretend anymore. You can't force yourself to stay in conversations that have no soul. You can't fake enthusiasm when your inner world is starving for something real, something raw, something honest. Maybe you once tried to fit in. You learned to speak the way people expected you to. But every time you did, a small piece of you went missing. There's a quiet sadness in silencing your need for truth. A kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work, but from constantly floating on the surface when all you want is to dive deep. Others want safety. You crave truth. They find comfort in predictability. You suffocate in pretense. They fear silence. You long for the kind of silence where masks fall off and something real begins. You may have thought you're hard to connect with, but maybe the truth is you're not meant for the shallow. You're not built for relationships that function but don't feel. You're not here to talk just for the sake of talking. You need connection that means something, where presence matters, where silence feels sacred. You need people who don't look away when you're in pain, people who don't change the subject when you start speaking your truth, people who aren't afraid of what's real because they're searching for it too. But when those people are hard to find, when you spend too long surrounded by social masks, when you begin to wonder if anyone else out there feels the same way, that's when something shifts. That's when you stop feeling just disconnected. You begin carrying emotions that don't even belong to you. And suddenly, your loneliness turns into something heavier. You don't just feel alone. You start absorbing the weight of a world that refuses to feel. Sign 3, you carry the emotions of others. Some days you wake up feeling heavy, anxious, exhausted, irritated, but you don't know why. Nothing happened. No one hurt you. Everything seems fine. And yet, there's a storm quietly swirling inside you that you can't explain or control. You try to shake it off, you sip your coffee, you play calming music, but the feeling stays, lurking, unnamed, like a cold wind pressing against your chest that refuses to leave. Maybe it's because you're living like an emotional filter. You don't just see the world, you absorb it. And when someone buries their sadness, you feel it. When someone holds back their anger, you carry it. When someone smiles to hide their collapse, you become the echo where that energy lands. Carl Jung called this state participation mystique, a condition where the boundary between you and others becomes blurred. You don't just understand people, you become them. And you end up holding the shadows they can't name or won't face. The scary part is the emotions you pick up from others don't arrive with labels. They don't come with faces. They show up as unfamiliar waves of energy that leave you confused. You think you're falling apart, but in reality, you're just too open to a world that doesn't know how to process itself. If you don't learn to separate what's yours from what you're carrying for others, you'll slowly start to lose yourself. One practice that can help is this. Take 15 minutes each day in silence. Close your eyes and ask yourself honestly and gently, is this feeling mine or am I holding it for someone else? That one question can save you from carrying pain that doesn't belong to you. But there's a deeper truth. When you're always the one absorbing, always the one healing, always the one others turn to. Maybe you're using healing as a way to avoid something. Avoid what? Avoid yourself. Because if you're always busy managing everyone else's pain, you never have to face the emptiness inside your own. So ask yourself, seriously, without deflecting, are you truly healing others? Or are you avoiding yourself by trying to heal them? Sign 4, you live through too many versions of yourself. Have you ever performed so well that no one knew you were in pain? You smiled at the right moments, nodded when expected, said the things people wanted to hear. You became the version of yourself that others found easiest to accept. You learned how to shrink, how to hide, how to soften yourself just enough to survive. You had a version of you at work, a version of you with family, another one on social media. Each mask had its own purpose. Each role helped you navigate the world. But every time you put one on, a small part of your real self slipped away. At first, you told yourself this was maturity, adaptability, emotional intelligence. But over time, the emptiness grew. You looked in the mirror and saw a familiar face that no longer felt like home. You went through your days working, returning, socializing, yet none of those moments felt truly yours. That emptiness didn't come from doing too little. It came from living too far from who you really are. You thought you were protecting yourself from hurt, but in reality, the slow erosion of your truth was the deepest cut of all. Maybe you believed that if you were kind enough, calm enough, smart enough, polished enough, then everything would be okay. But being okay is not the same as being real. And a life that only feels okay will never satisfy a soul that craves truth. Then one day, someone shows up, and suddenly, you don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to pretend to be strong. You don't have to hide the hurt. You don't have to work so hard to be likable. Their presence doesn't make you afraid of being seen. It reminds you of who you were before you forgot. And in that moment, something quiet and powerful happens. You realize something you've always known but never said out loud. You don't need one more mask. You need a place where you can finally take all of them off. Sign 5, you recognize your kind instantly. There are moments, brief, quiet, unforgettable, when someone looks at you and you just know. A glance, a silent nod, a presence that doesn't flinch, and something inside you whispers, I'm not alone. It's not because they look like you or share your story. It's because you feel something deeper, a presence that doesn't drain you, an energy that doesn't make you shrink, a quiet ease that says, finally, I don't have to explain myself. No performance, no effort, just you, being real, and still, you feel accepted. But connections like that are rare. Sometimes a whole year passes and no one makes you feel seen. Maybe your whole life, you've only found a few souls who truly got you. But once you've felt what real connection is like, you can't go back. You can't tolerate relationships that only exist to fill time. You can't fake a smile when your soul wants to cry. You can't keep playing roles in spaces that make you feel more invisible the closer you get. Awakened souls have a different kind of radar. They don't search with logic, and they feel through frequency, through depth, through vibration. And when two people on the same frequency meet, words become optional. Presence says enough. This is why your deepest exhaustion isn't from being alone. It's from being surrounded by people with whom you can't be yourself. So maybe now is the time to stop and ask yourself, who are you living close to? Do they bring out your real self or just keep you acting so you won't be left behind? Sign 6. You feel you were born for something greater. Not everyone feels pain doing a normal job, but you do. Each morning, even when everything looks fine, there's a quiet emptiness inside you. Something within you stirs, as if you're living beneath the level your soul was built to reach. You try to convince yourself things are okay. The job pays the bills. Life has a rhythm. Your relationships are not falling apart. But deep inside, there's a call. Not loud, not urgent, but persistent. Like an undercurrent that refuses to go away. It doesn't give you clear instructions, or it simply whispers that you can't keep living like this. Maybe you've asked yourself, what was I born to do? But the real question isn't about finding the answer. It's this: do I have the courage to live the truth I've always known deep down? Because living in alignment with that inner call comes with a price. You may have to give up stability. Give up being easily understood. Give up the approval of people who once thought they knew you. You'll become unpredictable, hard to define, and that makes others uncomfortable. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your courage highlights the fear they haven't faced. You'll walk paths no one around you has walked, and no one can tell you how. Because this path is yours alone. There is no map, only intuition. Carl Jung believed that those who become individuated, those who fully embody their true selves, carry a responsibility. Not to stand out, but to serve as a bridge between the world as it is and the world as it could be. You weren't born to be accepted. You were born to be a wave that shifts the entire tide. And the hardest part isn't discovering your purpose. It's becoming the person who's brave enough to live it. Sign 7. Your deepest wound is your greatest power. Maybe you were once called too emotional, too sensitive, too different. Maybe people laughed when you cried too easily, when you asked questions that made them uncomfortable, or when you believed in things they had long stopped believing in. But those same words that once wounded you also carved something rare into your soul. They gave you eyes that can see inward, and a heart soft enough to feel what others are too afraid to touch. You became someone who isn't afraid of the truth because you've already been broken by it and lived through it. Your wound doesn't need to be erased. It doesn't make you less. It marks you as someone who dared to care, dared to feel, dared to trust, and most of all, dared to be real in a world that rewards masks. Maybe you've tried to cover it, to bury it beneath layers of strength, silence, and pretending. But pain doesn't disappear. It only shapeshifts into tension you can't explain, into numbness you can't shake, into isolation that follows you everywhere. Carl Jung believed that the place where you are most wounded is also where light can enter. And not just to heal you, but so you can become someone who helps heal others. Not because you're flawless, but because you're honest. Only someone who's walked through the dark knows how to guide others without fear. Only someone who's been abandoned knows how to hold someone close without letting go. Only someone who's been swallowed by silence understands the power of being seen and heard. You don't need to become anyone's hero. You don't need to hide behind strength. You don't need to wear invincibility like armor. You just need to honor your wounds. Because sometimes, those cracks become the very windows through which the world sees something real for the first time. And when you learn to stand with your scars instead of hiding them, they become something else entirely. Not shame, not weakness, but a quiet badge that says, I lived, I didn't give up, I'm still here. So the question is no longer how to forget. The real question is, will you keep hiding your wound or let it become the light that leads others out of their own darkness? The world needs the unhidden version of you. You've spent most of your life adjusting yourself to fit expectations, to fit into boxes, to fit into relationships that only welcomed you when you brought less of yourself. And in the process, maybe you lost the most important thing of all, your truth. But if you've made it this far, if you're still here listening, maybe your soul is tired of living at the wrong frequency. Maybe you're ready to come home to yourself. The truth is, the world doesn't need one more person who knows how to endure. It doesn't need another person pretending everything is fine. It doesn't need someone else surviving by shrinking. What the world needs is something else entirely. It needs someone who dares to be real, who speaks what others won't, who feels what others fear, who shows up fully even when that fullness makes people uncomfortable. When you live in alignment with your true frequency, you stop chasing belonging, because belonging starts to find you. You begin to attract souls who carry the same kind of loneliness, the same kind of awareness, the same hunger for something real. You're no longer just alone, you become a bridge for others, a doorway, a signal. Every video you watch, every comment you leave, it's not random. It's part of something greater, a journey where you're not just hearing someone else's truth. You're remembering your own. This message didn't find you by accident. It came to you because a part of you is ready to stop hiding, ready to stop performing, ready to come back to yourself. So if you're ready to keep going one step at a time, start with something simple. Leave a comment, "I am awake," not for recognition, but as a quiet declaration to yourself, a turning point, a return. Hit subscribe, not just to watch videos, but so you don't miss the version of yourself that's slowly, finally coming back to life. One word at a time, one truth at a time, one step at a time. This journey won't be easy, but it will be real. And you won't be walking it alone. Welcome back. Welcome home. Welcome to you, unhidden, awakened, and finally, fully here.